Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. It is springtime in Baltimore. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I'm bringing out the Back to the Future scratch-offs presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We will be at Red Brick Station this week, but we are coming to all sorts of places. Go to Baltimore Positive and find out, moving around the Beltway and chatting with good folks. I waited a long time to get this guest on. Every time I reached him, he'd be like, I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book on lacrosse. I want to come on the show when I do it. We are the cradle of lacrosse. We certainly have a Hall of Fame around here. There is a new book, The American Game, History and Hope in the Country of Lacrosse. S.L. Price has been an author I've been reading for years and years and years. If the byline sounds familiar, he is a longtime Sports Illustrated, back when it was the real Sports Illustrated. And he has written this book. He's also the author of Playing Through the Whistle. And we have chatted at various points about all sorts of, in the old days of my journalism, Scott, they would call these takeout pieces or enterprise pieces. And I have John Eisenberg all the time on talking about Sports 2 was the Sunday insert where you could just write long form. You are one of the most decorated long form writers that I know of in sports, certainly. And it's taking you a little while to put this lacrosse thing together. Are you done? Are you toweled off at this point, Scott Price?
I'm toweling off. I'm toweling off. I mean, this was a really long project. I started in 2018. I was still at Sports Illustrated at the time, so I was sort of doing it in between projects. But then in 2020, I left the magazine after 26 years, and I've been buried in it ever since. Ended up doing about 370 interviews for it. Traveled to Israel, West Coast, up obviously to Baltimore, North Carolina, Chicago. A lot of different places. San Diego, went to 2 world championships. And essentially, I just got, I'm not a lacrosse guy, kind of like you, Nestor. I was not someone who grew up playing the game, but I was involved in a bunch of different stories at Sports Illustrated, and the sport got a hold of me, and it bit me, and it wouldn't let me go. And when that happens, that usually is a sign that you've got at least an intriguing story that's going to keep you interested for years. And that's exactly what this did. There wasn't a moment when I was researching or writing it where the people, first of all, were incredibly welcoming in lacrosse, incredibly generous with their time and their insight, incredibly honest with their insight. And, you know, as a sports writer, I've seen what's happened to sports in the last, 40 years. I came into covering sports in the mid 80s, and the access was extraordinary. I covered Michael Jordan in college, and when I was a student at North Carolina, and then the NBA, Michael Jordan would come out for 45 minutes before every single game on the road and at home and just hold court. And it was all very casual. And it was the same with baseball clubhouses and even, I mean, NFL locker rooms were a little bit tighter, but hockey, everything. The access, especially after COVID, has been cut to the bone at the Olympics, everywhere. And journalists, while dealing with, a cratering economy and a cratering industry economically, have also been dealing with a cratering access to athletes and personnel, and it's hurt the industry. I simply by chance dove into lacrosse at a time when the sport was the fastest growing sport in America, fastest growing team sport. Pickleball kind of took the shine off that, but it's still booming. And I the people were just so open. The access was extraordinary. Almost no one said no to me, and not only that, but it gave me all the time and patience in the world, and for that I'm eternally grateful, because I think the sport is actually quite important. Again, I'm not a lacrosse person. They'll tell you, of course, they think their sport is wonderful, but as a sort of Big Four sports writer, I went to 10 Olympics. I did a lot, but I've done a lot of different things. But lacrosse's importance really came across to me in doing this, and only reiterated itself throughout the process.
We lost John Feinstein recently, and I miss him dramatically because he would come on and we would just kibitz. It was just talk. And I would always say to him or any author, and I've written 4 books, and they've all been real personal and real like, you know, Jack Torrance and The Shining. Like literally, my wife would tell you that. Like if I'm writing in the spring, there's no hockey, there's no basketball, there's
Yeah,
no baseball, just writing all night, working
yeah,
all day, writing all night. Like that. And pump them out after the Ravens won championships. I'm the only one that chronicled it. And I felt like if I didn't tell the story, it wouldn't get told. I think I'm done writing books because of that sort of method acting, going into the basement, not knowing where the end
yeah,
of it is. And I've been chasing you down for years and all this, but you are, and look, I mean, anybody can Google SL Price and Sports Illustrated and see all of your work. And for 40 years, the lacrosse thing is off the track of what you
yeah,
did. You said it came to you. Now, I'm a East Baltimore guy. My last name's Aparicio. So I was kind of born with a
yeah,
glove and a bat in East Baltimore
yeah.
in the 70s.
Right.
But the lacrosse thing in Baltimore was a rich white kids thing. It always was. It was
Yeah,
always prep schooly. It was all of that. And now I look up, I'll be in Las Vegas next weekend when they're having playoff games. Denver, Florida, Notre Dame,
yeah,
Michigan, just all over the country. And it was very much Syracuse, Long Island,
right,
Baltimore.
right.
Maybe the Carolinas was sort of the next place where it kind of caught on. Did the Duke lacrosse thing bring you into lacrosse in some way?
Let me just say one thing. Yes, absolutely. So let me just say one thing before that. All my books and the stories that I was most taken with at Sports Illustrated were almost always at the confluence of sports and culture. I truly believe that sports reveals American culture and most international culture. It reveals people in a way almost no other exercise or entertainment does.
And
It's
can galvanize people in a way that nothing else can.
absolutely, and it also reveals everything. Look, as a sports writer, you can write about sport balls and strikes and scores all day, but you also will find yourself writing about civic institutions, local government, drugs and alcohol, performance enhancing drugs, sex, crime, everything under the umbrella can be, will dip sooner or later. Race will dip into the sports realm. And all my books either about Cuba or Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, or the death of Mike Coolbaugh, a minor league coach hit by a foul ball, or we're all in a way for me exploring the intersection between sports and culture. So this book is exactly the same in that path. I mean, to me, it's actually weirdly sort of similar to the Aliquippa book because I dove into a world and tried to learn as much as I possibly could about it because I found it important. And
And you didn't
you're
know a lot to begin with, correct?
no, I mean, I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up in a town that didn't have much of a lacrosse past at all. All the little league sports and everything else were, baseball, little league baseball, Pop Warner football, that kind of thing. Um, and I fiddled around with a stick in high school because my high school, some guys from my high school started a club team that lasted a little bit. But someone handed me a lacrosse stick and I ran around with it, not on the club, just running around and hitting it off, doing a little wall ball. But essentially, it was not my sport. And then I went to North Carolina, and you picked up on it very well. When I went to North Carolina in 1981, Willie Scroggs, Baltimore-born, blue-collar, poor, incredible, um, incredible figure in lacrosse, won championships as a player at Johns Hopkins, went down to North Carolina, and essentially began the expansion of the game. And that was right when his first national championship was right when I reached North Carolina. I didn't cover lacrosse there, but I was certainly aware of it. And all the expansion that you're now seeing in the sport, the Western expansion to Denver, to Florida, Indiana, Michigan, California, Texas, all those things, obviously Chicago area, all those things started in my mind in the modern era with Willie Scroggs leaving Hopkins and going down to North Carolina. So that was my first bite, and it was just sort of in the back of my mind. Then I went in 2006 for Sports Illustrated when the mayhem of the Duke lacrosse rape case in which three players were accused of raping three white players were accused of raping a African American stripper, um, uh, who then it was later found out had falsely accused and lied. She actually admitted either earlier this year or last year that she had lied, and admitted it at last. And the players were declared innocent, not just not guilty, but innocent. And in the early days of that, after the first sort of mayhem of it, where it turns out the prosecutor was overreaching and he later was disbarred, Michael Nifong. What I went down there for Sports Illustrated and worked with a great reporter named Pharrell Evans. And Pharrell very quickly sniffed out that there was something wrong with the case. And together we did a story for Sports Illustrated and sort of picked apart as much as possible the damage done by the case in the early days to just everything in that town, Durham, the school, the team, the players, the coach. And as wild as it was, when I left, there were a couple things that hit me when I was covering it that I didn't know. I had exactly what you said. Look, it's absolutely has a tradition and a reputation of being, lacrosse does, of being an upper class prep school exclusive money sport played mostly by white players, and that's largely true. But what I found when I went to Duke was the roster certainly had the share of those players, but there were also blue collar sons of firemen and cops from Long Island, the Loftus brothers, Casey Carroll, who they were the first kids in their family to go to college, and lacrosse was being used in much the same way that basketball or football is in the inner city. It was a way to climb up and move up a class in America. And these guys were going to they're going to get a degree from Duke, be the first in their family to get an education, and they were going to get a job on Wall Street or somewhere through the most incredible network of business sports connections I've ever heard of. And that was the other thing. I'd never heard of the sort of Wall Street network that schools have, where say a school like Yale has, a pipeline into Barclays in New York. And all the individual schools all have the Georgetown, Hopkins have these connections, a lot of them filled by former players now on Wall Street, that continues to churn on and on. And that network started in Baltimore with Alex Brown, the oldest investment firm in America. So anyway, I didn't know any of that, but I'm like, wait a minute, I'm used to sports where you go to high school, you go to college, and if you're good enough, you're going to make a lot of money or a substantial amount of living playing the pro version of your game. Well, in lacrosse, especially when I first was exposed to it, that wasn't the case at all. You still can't make a ton of money, maybe $60,000 just from playing indoor, outdoor, maybe a little bit more as a professional player. You can certainly today, top six figures through with the combination of playing and coaching and that kind of thing. But it's not the destination for money.
I've had Jake Steinman and all them on from 30 years ago doing indoor lacrosse. I covered Warthogs games at the Capitol Center and the Baltimore Thunder, Jim Darkangelo. They would do these commercials to try to sell lacrosse. And I always thought to myself, if your kid's got a lacrosse stick, he's not trying to get rich, and the same thing was kind of sort of for soccer. If you played soccer here, it felt like, we've had one or two kids ever really go to Europe and be successful in this in 50 years of this, making a lot of money. But lacrosse was not that. Lacrosse was like, it was more, I guess to go to college is the way I saw it in Baltimore.
Right. But it was to go to college. But the way to make money was to use that network to get a job working extremely hard on Wall Street, like sitting in front of a terminal for 14 hours and in either, investment banking or real estate or whatever. That was the payoff. So right away, I'm thinking, wait, so first of all, this is a sport that unlike the cliche and the caricature, which is often true, there's also these exceptions. Which were including Wall Street and the Sons of Long Island firemen who were involved in 9/11. So this is a different twist on the game. And then in 2010 for Sports Illustrated, I went off and did a story on the Iroquois Nationals, who are the third best. Became while I was sort of working on it, were the third best team are the third best team in the world right now. They're the only indigenous team recognized by an international federation, and they're superb. And they're the opposite end of the sort of prep school network, prep school image. They're a lot of them very, lower class economically, and the sport is a religion, unlike any other sport. It's a way of pleasing the creator. People are given a wooden cradle stick, babies at birth, and men die with it and carry it into their coffin. They play an extremely beautiful and thrilling style of game, idiosyncratic, behind the head, a lot of offense, not that great on defense, but incredibly thrilling to watch, full of passing, sort of the beautiful game in soccer translated to lacrosse. It's gorgeous to watch. It's fun, and it is an expression of sovereignty because they travel on their passports and they try to get into different countries. For example, England in 2010 and in 2015, Scotland. And if they're not allowed to play on their own travel on their own passports, they won't play the tournament. So you're talking about a completely different side of American culture that goes 1,000 years into the past. No other sport goes as far into the American past, the continent's past, as lacrosse does. It started in 1100. Okay, it's not inherited like baseball from rounders from England. It's not like football inherited from rugby. Okay, this is a sport that came out of the woods. Came out of the stick is made of hickory, the original sticks, and the ball was made of deerskin stuffed with feathers. Okay, so here's a sport that suddenly I'm doing the story on it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with the cliche.
By the way, how'd you find out about that story? Because doing this story at Sports Illustrated isn't as simple as, hey, I got an idea, let's go run around.
No. It actually works that way. So I'm just casually in 2009, I'm reading the New Yorker, a John McPhee story on lacrosse, and that's sort of the only place you can, you'd probably read in mainstream magazines. Lacrosse, John McPhee, one of the great nonfiction writers of really the last 50 years, wrote this long piece on lacrosse, and there was a throwaway line mentioning the Iroquois, how they play as their individual country, and they're recognized by International Lacrosse Federation as a country, and they're the third best team in the world.
And you've never heard of this before.
I had never heard of it, and I sort of had a vague sense that the game had started with the Native Americans. But
see, as a Baltimorean who never played the game, but I've had, oh my God, I mean, I'm in Baltimore. I've had every lacrosse person ever. Tony Seaman being really the leader, who was a big listener of mine. He's a great man. He would always come to my studio and say, dude, you like hockey. You like ice hockey. It's the same game, and you're in Baltimore, and you're on the radio. Get over to Hopkins. Get over to Homewood. You got the Gate brothers, who I've known for years. And I mean, I would always open my microphone. Jay Pivik, one of my great sponsors with Toyota, when I was like, you need to understand lacrosse. I'm like, dude, my last name's Aparicio. We played baseball. And the lacrosse story you have, there was one kid in my neighborhood in Dundalk who had a lacrosse stick and a ball. And you know what he did with it? He threw it up against the wall and he caught it because there was nobody to play lacrosse with. He would come out and play baseball with us with his lacrosse stick and would catch the ball because there was nobody to play lacrosse with in my neighborhood. We didn't play soccer either, or rugby, or any of that other stuff. We didn't go polo riding. We didn't play golf because we were poor. So, like, lacrosse to me was foreign. But the one thing I always knew about it, it was a Native American, Indian, as they would say, game here that was played long before we came and raped and pillaged the land, right?
Right.
That's all I know about it, the history of it.
But so I, I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is an entirely different kettle of fish here that I'm dealing with, and that most people don't know about. So so that after with that, and the Iroquois, by the way, they've always called themselves the Haudenosaunee, and now they're officially called the Haudenosaunee as opposed to the Iroquois, but most people know them as Iroquois, located in upstate New York. The Onondaga Nation, there's 6 nations, and the Onondaga Nation, the capital of it, is right near Syracuse. So there's always been a pipeline of a trickle of players that go to and play for Syracuse and are often great, All Americans. Jim Brown obviously is the greatest, to some people's minds, let's just say one of the greatest football players of all time. Well, Jim Brown was arguably in the late 50s the greatest lacrosse player of all time at Syracuse, and his teammate, his co-captain, was Orrin Lyons, who basically was an All-American goalie, Onondaga, and Orrin Lyons later became one of the most important indigenous activists in America. And he's addressed the United Nations. He spoke at Muhammad Ali's funeral. And in 1983, Orrin Lyons co-founded the Iroquois Nationals and basically started it to reclaim the native game, the field game, because what happened was, in many ways, the Native Americans were shut out of the field game for 100 years in the late 1800s by Canada. So they took up box lacrosse, indoor lacrosse in the 30s, and that became sort of the central Native American game. They still played the field game for their medicine games, for their games to heal, which are games to heal the community and heal people, and played often a year only by men with wooden sticks.
And the box game was really adopted in Canada, right? But primarily because of not Native Americans, but by nations, right?
Well, not only that, but it was also adopted. Canada sort of codified the field game in the late 80s, 1800s. But when box came in the 1930s, it was invented, going back to hockey. It was, Tony Seaman's right. I mean, box lacrosse was invented essentially by the owners of the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs to fill the arenas in the off season, in the off hockey season. And he's exactly right.
And later used by Abe Poland to try to fill the Capitol Center, right? Literally.
But because it was so much like hockey, almost immediately Canada also embraced, like, basically stopped playing field, and everybody went all in almost overnight on box lacrosse. And the thing is that even though the Native Americans were sort of shut out of the field game in Canada, they were allowed to play box, and it became central to the Native American experience in both Canada on both sides of the St. Lawrence River. So Orrin Lyons founds this team, sorry. And in 1987, now again, contrary to sort of the upper class image of lacrosse, the sport, the federation, votes in the 4 nations that were then playing lacrosse, Australia, England, United States, and Canada, accepts the Native Americans, and in 1987, mind you, as a nation, and says, we accept you, and you are now a playing nation in with us, of equal with us in lacrosse. And so again, that's not exactly, sort of a stuffy upper class thing to do. That's a pretty progressive, in fact, extraordinary progressive move. If you think about it, there's no other place, there's no other institution in America that really exalts and celebrates, and there have been tensions, by the way, don't get me wrong, and it's all detailed in the book, but in the end, exalts, celebrates, and essentially treats the Native Americans on an equal level, as a co-partner in their endeavor. And it's all to lacrosse's credit that they did that. And it has caused tensions, because think about it. Look, lacrosse is a sport in essence. I mean, not in essence, it is a sport. And its job as a federation, the lacrosse federation, is just to put on championships and to grow the game. And
I would say, like, lacrosse isn't a business or an industry, but it is. But it's not as sort of routed out as the NFL or the NBA, right? In that way.
Oh no, absolutely no. It's a very expensive game. That's part of the problem for getting it out to people. And of course, it's not, for the most part, at least nationally, funded by high schools like football is. So, I mean, funded for equipment and that kind of thing. So, Anyway, I've lost the string. There, go
That's all
ahead.
right. The American game is here. I'm sure we'll pick it back up. Scott Price, S.L. Price, History and Hope in the country of lacrosse. There, I got a little better viewing on thick book. Premise was, when did the light go on and say, all right, I'm doing a lacrosse book. I'm hooked. Because that's the author's kiss of life and death, that there's going to be a book and you're going to see it through. But
Yeah,
I mean, 7 years you've been working on
yeah,
this. What
yeah.
was the premise of, other than, hey, lacrosse is cool. I don't know a lot about it. Let me learn something. Because it sounds like that's kind of where this thing came from for you. Sort of
No, no,
midlife crisis, Scott.
well, it's not necessarily middle life crisis. Every one of my books has been like going to grad school. Like, I mean, I'm able to dive into a world and get educated. I mean, essentially learn about something I don't know about and raise the bar so that I can at least become um, learned enough to write intelligently about it. And as a nonfiction writer, the gift of that is, you get to talk to people and they'll teach you. And so that's what happened. So essentially it bit me and it wouldn't let me go. And I would say to people exactly what I've said to you for the last 20 minutes, including my editor, who was my editor on my previous book. And he was like, well, I'd like to work with you on something. And I said, look, I know this isn't the Bill Belichick, tells all book. I know it's not, at least on paper, commercial, but this is what I find interesting. And you have to, as an author, and Nestor, you'll understand this. There's nothing else but the work. What I mean is you can't count on reviews, you can't count on sales, you can't count on critiques, you can't count on anything. You can't count on anyone reading it. If you're going to dive into a project like this, you better love the subject and be intrigued by it, because it's just you and it. And as you understand, by someone who goes in the basement, your family doesn't really understand it, your friends don't really understand it, and it's you. And so if you're bored with the subject, you're dead. You're in big trouble. So it is a bit of a gamble, but all I can tell you is every single day, every single month, and every single year I was working on this, I kept learning more and more. I felt more and more justified by the importance of the subject, and I kept more and more gratified by the honesty and generosity of the people who took the time and patience to talk to me again and again and again.
If you love lacrosse, and a lot of people in Baltimore do, this book is modern, kind of up to date. I guess for a guy like me that doesn't know a lot, who, let's say, my grandkid falls in love with lacrosse and I have to figure it out and learn a little bit about it. The premise of it was what in regard to your education, and then sort of informing folks and saying this is the history. And you said it's really important. What makes it important, Scott?
Well, I just think that, look, there's a famous quote by Jacques Barzun that if you're a baseball guy, you'll probably have tripped over this, where someone's going to talk to you about the magic of the national pastime, right? Almost always they will quote a quote from Jacques Barzun that says, "Whoever wants to know the heart and mind of America had better learn baseball, the
Fair enough.
rules and the reality of the game." Well, baseball came from England. Baseball doesn't include the Native American experience, nor does it track almost exactly as a metaphor the appropriation of the land and the westward movement of America uh, by the United States. What I mean is, essentially, the game was taken from Native Americans. It was appropriated by them. For a while, they were banned from playing it professionally. I mean, because they were professionals, so they were banned in that sort of amateur thing in the late 1800s, and they were sidelined. The sport became an American upper class game, for the most part, the field game. And baseball does not include the explosion of the sport in the last 40 years because of Title IX. The growth of the game, it's grown a lot on the men's side, but it's grown even more on the women's side at Division I schools because of Title IX. So you have that involved in the sport in a way that certainly baseball doesn't encompass half the population and the empowerment of women. So just those two factors tell me something. It includes Wall Street. It includes no sport, I would argue, has more of um connection, even to this day, with the U.S. military. Um, you have players at Duke and Hopkins and everywhere else who will. There's a regular pipeline of players that go and join the Army Rangers, and join Navy SEALs, go into the hardest parts of combat and the most strenuous sort of parts of our military complex, and often would get their college degree and enlist, not go in as officers. And this is a tradition in lacrosse that you find nowhere else. So it encompasses Wall Street, the military, women, Native Americans. And I would argue that, let's face it, there's a lot of excessive drinking, binge drinking, in college lacrosse. It's a big, tradition. It's certainly a part of the culture. That's a part of American culture too. Drinking is a thing in America. And I would just say that overall, you are looking at a sport that in some ways reflects the culture of America in a way that no other sport does, and encompasses it. And it's because of that, I think it's important and bears both examining and understanding.
SL Price, Scott Price is our guest. The book is The American Game, History and Hope in the Country of Lacrosse. You can pick it up. You're going to be signing some books. You're clearly going to be in Baltimore several times. I'll send everybody out and get all the details and all that stuff. We'll put it out at Baltimore Positive as well. This is the thing about lacrosse for me, and it's not just because I'm an Aparicio or a baseball guy or because I've talked about baseball and football here for 35 years on the radio. I live in Baltimore County. And the Orioles, and this is where I'll bring you back. You can come back and be SL Price from Sports Illustrated and be the baseball, football, basketball guy. But we're trying to fix this show that Angelos has destroyed, and after Cal Ripken, and what the Orioles are going to be, and selling tickets. And the Yankees were here last week and they can't sell tickets. They give out bobbleheads for May the 4th be with you. They sell some extra tickets for trinkets and stuff. But I am, I'm a lifer baseball guy, and I don't know a lot about lacrosse, probably because I was a baseball guy, right?
Right,
But I
same
would
season,
say,
same season, yeah.
yeah, well, this is the problem. And I
Right.
think this is the problem for baseball in this city and for the Orioles in this city. God bless Brooks Robinson and Jim Palmer trying to sell it. And my cousin, and who's still alive, oldest living Hall of Famers, we record this. In my community where I was from, we played baseball. That was so 1978,
Yeah,
1982, right?
right.
Now, when I drive around my community, and I would say this to David Rubenstein, who just spent
Yeah.
$1.8 billion buying the baseball team, the enemy for baseball in Baltimore is lacrosse. And every single time I drive around, if I drive around tonight and it's May, if I drive around in March, if I drive around any time, and I live in the northern suburbs, if I just drive past any school, any place where there's a field and there are lights, it's not a baseball field. It's a
Yeah,
lacrosse field. And when
right.
I went to Japan the first time, maybe 15 years ago, I took the bullet train out of Narita into Tokyo. And you can't see much because the damn train's going 180 miles an hour. Like, the only thing you see are baseball diamonds when you're in Japan. You see them everywhere out the window, dozens on the way just getting into the city. And I'm thinking to myself, it's the one thing I never see in America anymore. When I drive around, I see soccer fields, I see baseball, I see football fields. You play football. In my community, it's lacrosse. And for every little Jack and every little Jill that are born here, whether you're born into Gilman or whether you're born to Dundalk, whether you're in a traditionally African American neighborhood, whether you're in the city, whether you're in the county, you don't see baseball fields. You see lacrosse fields, and that's in my community. And to your point, if you're female and you're in anywhere in the northern suburbs, we call it the white and black butterfly here in Baltimore. You can Google that one on a socioeconomic background and redlining and all the other crap that's going on here for 50 years. But it's faded as a place where kids play baseball. Now, I've had Mark Viviano, I've had Jamie Costello last week. My son plays little. What's because you like baseball? You're a baseball guy, your kid plays baseball. But that's not the majority of what's going on in our marketplace. And that is Major League Baseball's problem. It's Cal Ripken's problem. It's anybody that's connected to baseball is that Lacrosse is exciting for kids, and you hit each other and you throw the ball and you don't play right field. You don't have to sit around. When it's cold out, you play anyway. Like, I see it here. And I think if I have a grandchild, even as an Aparicio, that kid's going to want to play lacrosse. They just are.
Well, let me add to that because during the concussion, when football and the concussion discussion was really at its height, I was reporting this book and I thought, middle class mothers at this point, kids are surrounded by cotton batting and not allowed to do anything, walk the streets or whatever. Mothers are not going to allow their kids to play football and risk concussion. And lacrosse is a perfect sort of alternative because it's great for an aggressive, hard-hitting, athletic kid. But let me just say the other thing about lacrosse. And Kyle Harrison, the African American, the great African American player for Johns Hopkins, the only one African American to win a Tewaaraton Award, which is the Heisman Trophy of lacrosse, told me, look, the great thing about lacrosse is you don't have to be, first of all, 6'8". You don't have to run a 4.40. Like if you're a decent athlete, you can get a stick in your hand, start practicing, and become adept at the sport extremely quickly. The one thing I know now, this doesn't happen nearly as often now because like other sports, lacrosse has lots of travel teams and kids are playing earlier, so on and so forth. But over and over my research in the history of the game, you have, I mean, Northwestern, the core of Northwestern, the women's team was built on a pair of sisters who never had played lacrosse before and were recruited like as they jogged by the lacrosse office for Kelly Amonte Hiller. And she ran out and got them, and they became the sort of foundation of her program. And, Hopkins, the first black player for Hopkins in the late 60s, Joe Carlton, was a basketball player who was recruited to play basketball, had never played high school lacrosse. But if you're a good athlete, like lacrosse is, footwork and knowing how to position yourself, and you get a stick in a great athlete's hands, they can play defense pretty quickly. But we're talking about, Alabama football, right? The great Alabama football is not going to take a basketball player and start them on their Alabama #1 football team. Johns Hopkins, in the midst of being the dynasty, the winner of 40 national champions, put Joe Carlton and other players, they were recruiting football players to come out and play. And very quickly, a good athlete can be not only sort of pick up the game, but could play it at its highest level. So it's incredibly rewarding in a very quick way for a converted athlete. Many soccer players, for example, many women, once they found that girls who were in high school found, oh no, soccer's kind of tapped out. It's become much more competitive. If I want to go to college and play a sport, I'm going to pick up lacrosse because soccer's kind of overwhelmed with girls at this point. But the field is wide open for lacrosse programs. It's booming. And you had a lot of very good athletes with very little lacrosse experience converting to lacrosse and picking up the game. So the game is incredibly rewarding in a very quick way that, say, a baseball player picks up the game, you're not going to pick up that in 6 months. You're just not. Football, it's arcane. It's obviously got its way. I mean, there's almost no sport that rewards you like lacrosse. So baseball's facing that as well. Now, again, I will tell you, Nestor, you are in the heartland of lacrosse. So I understand Baltimore's problems, but it's I do see baseball fields elsewhere. I mean, so I don't think it's quite the crisis that it seems in Baltimore, but I take your point.
Scott Price is an author and writer. You've been checking out his work in Sports Illustrated. If you know anything about sports, the book is The American Game, History and Hope in the Country of Lacrosse, author of Playing Through the Whistle, as well as a whole bunch of other different things. I think the last time we talked was Aliquippa, PA, and you were doing a football thing. And you're going to be in Baltimore at the Enoch Pratt Library. I want to promote that on Thursday, the 22nd of May. Right. You can find out all the information. Now that Megan's doing I Love Baltimore, I got to make new friends with the Enoch Pratt folks and get them down here. But you'll be in Baltimore. the book, and now that it's out, and it's just literally out this week in time for playoffs, championships, everything that goes on. Did Bill Belichick talk book with you, Mister? For being a football guy, he's known as sort of the lacrosse whisperer in some way.
Yeah, I did not go after Belichick. I know he's a super fan of the game. I know he's very interested in it. There have been stories written about it, and I just thought, you know what, it's I didn't think I would strike much gold with Belichick, so I didn't do that. I will say I know how devoted he is to the game, and he's devoted to the game in a way that a lot of lacrosse people are. When he left the Patriots and didn't get a job in the NFL, I thought to myself, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Belichick on a lacrosse sideline someday, either as an assistant coach or whatever. He loves the game so much. All three of his kids play. His daughter became a coach. He loves the game, and as gruff, and I've seen it, as gruff and as standoffish Belichick can be in interviews. Every time I've seen him interviewed about lacrosse, the guy is incredibly engaged. His face lights up. He's incredibly happy. He loves the game, and that's a tribute to lacrosse.
Well, he would come in here with Petramala and just hang out and just watch practice all the time.
Yeah, no, he loves it. And so I honestly believe that someday you're going to see him on a lacrosse sideline helping out. I don't think he'll be a head coach, but he'll want to be there.
Scott, this is going to be my ultimate tribute to you because I'm getting to be an old fart at this point, and I'm getting a little bored with it all. To everything you talked about, I got the Justin Tucker crap going on here. The second round pick, they took another kid with problems and zero tolerance. They've banned me after 40 years. I'm not a real media guy. I can wallpaper their place. So, like the baseball and football, the arrogance of all of it, I've reached to rock and roll and little to society and more trying to get the felon king out of the Oval Office and all of that. So I've moved on to stuff. But the lacrosse thing has always sort of passed me by in some way. Even when Tony Seaman and Petramal and all my lacrosse buddies are telling me, you got to adopt lacrosse. There's no money involved. It's more pure. It's more this. Right. And I'm like, I don't drink enough. I'm not a bro. I didn't go to the Gilman. And I always kid him about all of that, but you're proving to me that maybe there's something out there in life that I haven't discovered yet that I'm going to find and turn into like a rugby guy or never a pickleball guy. That's a joke, but this is something that's interesting to you that like as an adult, you picked it up and made a book. If I would have told you 20 years ago, you're going to write a book and devote 7 years of your life to lacrosse, you probably would have looked at me like you're nuts, right?
I would have looked at you and said you're nuts. But let me just say one other thing, Nestor. Baltimore black lacrosse, the history of the black players in lacrosse in inner city Baltimore is very rich, especially with white flight from the public schools in the 60s. The black players started playing lacrosse. A lot of ex-football players picked it up in the spring and so on and so forth.
Well, there was access here. There weren't high school teams anywhere else, right?
Right. And one of the great stories is the Morgan State lacrosse team, started by Kyle Harrison's father, along with other players, Miles Harrison, Dr. Miles Harrison. And, they in the early 70s began this incredible run. They took down one of the top teams in the nation, Washington and Lee, on the road. It was an incredible success story. The 10 Bears is a book by Miles Harrison. And a little Baltimore trivia for you. So the head coach of Morgan State was a guy named Chip Silverman. Chip Silverman was a bit player in the movie Diner by Barry Levinson, and an old friend of Barry Levinson. He was the guy who was like selling suits out of the back of a trunk of a car. And Chip Silverman was the white coach of the Morgan State program when it first started, because he was a Morgan State administrator, and he sort of was this key figure for African-American lacrosse in Baltimore. And in some ways, he sort of bridged the old line Jewish part of Baltimore with the African-American community. It was a nice bridge, incredible story. Frankly, it's a movie that Barry Levinson should direct at some point.
All right. Well, the book is out. You're titillating me, S.L. Price. Scott Price is our author, The American Game. If you love lacrosse, I've been waiting 7 years for you to finish the damn thing. So I'm glad I at least have you. Are you done? I mean, it's finite, right? It's not an infinite. This isn't an internet study. But what happens next for you? Book signing at Enoch Pratt later on. Are you working on another book?
No, that's see now you're a cruel man. You're a cruel man, Nestor, because basically my brain is completely uh, tapped out. I need to recharge. I don't know what I'm doing next. I'm coming to Baltimore. I'm coming to the library. I'm going to sign books. I'm going to be in conversation with Steve Stenerson, who's the former U.S. lacrosse executive director, and he's a great guy, completely steeped in the sport. I have a ton of respect for him, and so it's gonna be fun.
All right. Well, listen, next time I have you on, no disrespect to your book, well, I'll promote it before, during, and after. Next time I have you on, we should just do like a sports thing. Like you're coming to Baltimore, like Orioles, Ravens. Are you still a sports guy, or have you
Sure.
sort of
Yeah.
removed yourself a little bit from the Sports Illustrated grind?
Well, I mean, the fact is that I was, I've been buried in this book. I've been writing it. I've been editing it for the last year. Like, I mean, so I have been sort of taken out of it. Uh, but I will tell you, I was out in San Francisco just recently and went to two ball games, and it was just a joy to be back in a ballpark. So I'm ready to get back into it.
Baseball's like the mafia, keeps bringing you back in. We thought that in Baltimore, like 192 wins last few years. Just
Yeah,
thought, oh, this is going to get easy, and then they have to
yeah,
go out and pitch every night, and figure it out.
yeah,
And young players have to perform. One
exactly.
ones actually have to go out and hit like Johnny Bench. So
Right.
Scott Price is an author. He's a busy guy. He's going to be back in Baltimore. I owe you a crab cake when you get here on the 22nd. Get down to Enoch Pratt. I'm still one of those guys that like writes books and reads books and likes words and all of that. Thinks the books shouldn't be burned; they should be read and all of that. So, Scott, congratulations on getting this done. I know it's always the hardest thing. All work and no play makes SL Price a dull boy, but I'll get you out here to Baltimore, and I hope you sell 1 million of these things. I hope everybody that loves lacrosse wants to learn more about lacrosse, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been incredibly fun.
Scott
And
Price is joining us here. You got a parting shot for me?
no, I just want to say, and thank you for your patience. You're the first podcast I've been waiting to come back on you, and you've been incredibly patient with me for years. I kept putting you off, so thank you, Nestor, for having me.
It'll go downhill from here. The problem, Scott, is that so few people really know sports. I went out to dinner the other night accidentally with Dave Sheinin of the Washington Post. I was in his neighborhood. I threatened him when I was in his neighborhood that we would have beer. He paid for it. We fought over it and did all that. And after like an hour just sitting in the ball game, we didn't pay attention to the ball, just talking. I said to my wife was with me. I said, there's so few people that I can talk sports with at this level who have done it at that point. So I love having you on. I will stalk you and bother you, even though the book is done. On to your next project. SL Price, Scott Price, the very elusive Scott Price, can be captured at Enoch Pratt on the 22nd of the month, downtown Baltimore. Get down there and make sure if you're reading his book, read some more books too, because it's important. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking, reading and writing and arithmetic and lacrosse at Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.